Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
As the pandemic upends teaching, fewer students want to pursue it. Well, that means a teacher shortage could be on the horizon, and equipped with federal aid, summer schools aim for a huge increase in enrollment. So wait a minute, we got less people interested in teaching, big increase in summer school, and now new test scores show students rebounding after pandemic-related learning losses. Well, there is a lot to talk about, a lot of education going on here, and even if you're not in education, even if you don't have a child, obviously, both of those should be obvious why then you would care about this topic. But even if you don't fit either of those criteria, how we educate, right, our young people inevitably affects our workforce, our economy, and so much more. And that, for those reasons, we cannot begin a conversation on education without
TrueChat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Okay, there's a lot here today, but I want to start, and we're going to change the word of the day a little bit. The word is teach, but I'm going to use the part of my dictionary that says synonyms. It says teach is the basic inclusive word for the imparting of knowledge or skills. Instruct implies systemized teaching, usually in some particular subject. Educate stresses the development of latent faculties and powers by formal systematic teaching. Train implies the development of particular faculty or skill. School is often the equivalent to any of the preceding, sometimes specifically to a discipline to endure something difficult. So to just say teach says an awful lot. Are you instructing? Are you educating? Are you training? And what's happening in what is a school? So there are lots of words here that we throw about as synonyms, which really have different meanings. So with that, what are we taking on first, Justin?
Well, so basically we've got three major things to talk about. We got three segments to do it, so we've got a lot to cover, and we hope that you all will hang in there with us because I think there's a lot of good information here. And as we go through this, we'd really like for you to share with us what you're thinking by sending us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org, podcast@thestateofus.org. We've got three articles all linked on our website, thestateofus.org. The first one here from the New York Times, Lance, a survey by the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education. There's a mouthful. Sounds like an educational institution, right?
Right.
Found that 19% of undergraduate level and 11% of graduate level teaching programs saw a significant drop in enrollment this year, referring to 2021. And Teach for America, which recruits recent college graduates to teach in low-income schools across the country, said it had received fewer applications for its fall 2021 core compared with this period last year. Going on, the challenges in teacher recruitment and retention run deeper. The number of education degrees conferred by American colleges and universities dropped by 22% between 2006 and 2019, despite an overall increase in U.S. university graduates, stoking concern about a future teacher shortage. Because, right, basically what we're explaining here is, well, there's more college graduates across the board, but there are less, even though there's more graduates, there are less graduating as teachers or with some kind of teaching degree. So it's actually, that's where we talk about, right, that kind of idea of, well, if you're in a small town and you're not growing, but you're staying the same, you're actually shrinking because other people are growing. Mm-hmm. Well, not only are they losing ground, but they're losing even more ground because there's more people graduating from college and even less teachers than there would have been if it had stayed the same. So that gap is widening. For those of you that don't know, and I want to mention this because this is inevitably going to come up as we're going to talk about how much teachers are paid, right? Because okay, well, there's not enough people teaching. So is it that they make too little money? Well, the national average for a public school teacher is roughly $61,000. Now that doesn't, include benefits or anything like that. And as Lance and I have discussed, that's not necessarily an accurate representation of what any particular teacher makes because, teachers in California versus those in Alabama, The ones in California make a lot more than $61,000 a year, and the ones in Alabama, the top end probably doesn't even make $61,000 a year. So there's a lot of discrepancy there in understanding that. But if we just take the $61,000, Lance, and we say, well, let's raise teacher salaries by 10%, right? What would that take? How much would that cost us? Well, that'd mean that we'd be raising every teacher's salary by about $6,100 a year if we're using the average, right? And there are about 3.5 million public school teachers, according to the Department of Education. So let's do some basic math. $6,100 times 3.5 million gives you $21,350 million total cost to increase wages. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, doesn't it, Lance? But just in the relief package, right, that President Joe Biden signed into law, $200 billion plus for education.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't want to, I'd love $21 billion. So $21 billion is not just, we're chump change. But the point is that we've already done even bigger steps than that. What Republicans did last year, what Democrats did this year.
About 8% of public school teachers are leaving the workforce annually through retirement or attrition. So not only are you dropping by about 20% of the number of people graduating every year, but you're losing another 7 to 10% every year who are getting out of the profession, either by retiring or just saying, you know what, I've had enough. I think what we've seen this year, and this is just anecdotal, is that teachers want to feel respected. And money is one aspect of that. But I think now's the time to strike. I think the iron is hot because I think many people have had to have their youngsters at home all year and have had to try to juggle a job and also make their kids do the work in a much different fashion than they've had before. And I think the respect for teachers has gone up. Not that it was ever low, but it was like, okay, you're a teacher, teach kids. But now having children at home have taught parents and grandparents how difficult the job of being an educator is. And I think the respect for teachers is at an all-time high. And one way to do that is to give them more money. I mean, again, let's face it. I used to keep a political cartoon in my room. And this lady said, this person said, well, you need to pay me X amount of dollars as a teacher. And this senator, was in the cartoon, said, oh my gosh, that's just way too much. Well, you pay your baby center X amount of money and you have them watch the kids. Well, I watch 25 kids, so many hours a day times, how many ever days I'm hired to teach. That would be $170,000. And this was a political cartoon from the 1990s.
Right.
Okay. We're not making that, right? You even said the average, which is not even where to go, is $61,000. Nobody's averaging $100,000 a year being a teacher. And that was what the cost of a teacher would be if you were paying a babysitter. And you don't expect a babysitter to do all the things that you expect a teacher to do. So there's historically this, oh, we respect teachers and oh, it's so good for you to be a teacher. But words are cheap. And when you look at, what you have to do and what you're required to do, and the requirements have gotten stronger. The requirements have gotten, it's more difficult to be a teacher now. And so it's a daunting job.
There's a component of the respect thing too that I think could be worked on, which is we've moved to encourage teachers to teach so systematically, right? To say, well, here's how we're going to evaluate you. So you do these things for your students. And it's becoming, I think one of the reasons you would hope that a lot of people become teachers is because they want to have the opportunity to impact young people's lives, right? And it's becoming less about impacting their lives and more about getting them to meet a particular standard, which doesn't leave a lot of leeway for you to adjust or spend time in ways that fit your skill set or that use your strengths to help young people overcome their challenges. And so I think it's, I guess, and this is, I don't have any evidence for this, right? But satisfaction with teaching, I think, is decreasing in part because of the approach that we're pushing, which is crazy because we have the evidence to show that it's not working, right? I mean, things are not getting better with how we're educating youth. It's getting worse. And yet we're still using the same system and even doubling down. It's not getting better. So the answer is we need more standards and we need more testing and that'll fix it. And it's like, no, that's part of what's wrong, And so I guess I want to point, I just think that's an important point to make that, yeah, we can pay them more, but I think that you'd also have a lot more people that would want to be teachers or stay teachers if they felt like they had control over, tell me what I need to get them to learn and then let me decide how to teach them to do that, but that's also, yes, there are jobs.
Why weren't you my principal?
Well, that's that whole
Why aren't you part of the State Board of Education? Don't
we know that in businesses where managers empower their employees and say, here's the objectives we need you to meet, you figure out how to meet them, you figure out how to set up this floor. You figure out what's going to be the most effective, right? And if you're not getting it done, then we'll find somebody else that can. But let's give you the latitude to figure out how to do this the most effectively, because then you have some kind of ownership in the process instead of it being, well, then if it goes wrong, right, it's somebody else's fault. It's like, no, you came up with this, right? So if there's nobody to blame other than yourself if you're not happy with the returns. And likewise, then if we go to fire you, we told you what metrics you needed to meet and you didn't do it. And we gave you the leeway to do it instead of, what you have right now, which is, well, you told me I had to do it this way. And that's really not, that's not the way that's the most effective, or I can't do it that way. So I guess I would say that, yeah, we should pay them more, but I think we also have to think more about how are we looking at education and teaching. And that kind of leads us into our next segment, right, about summer school and kind of rethinking when we say school, what all should be included in that, right? Is it just, well, we're just going to go to the classroom, sit there and get lectured at and then go do some assignments? Is that really the best we got, or is there something better? Find out. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Lance, an educator of 35 years. We've got federal aid that's coming through, that's bolstering the education system right now. And summer school's looking at a happening time, maybe. Looking at it as more like it might be summer camp than summer school. But, right, with educational outcomes as part of the equation. So it's almost like, let's figure out how we can mix not just classroom experiences, but real world experiences and fun to teach students things. Is that what it sounds like to you? And is that a good thing?
Of course. That's what education is supposed to be. I'm sitting here thinking and having, I had a discussion with my daughter, and she was over at a friend's house, and little 5-year-old boy in kindergarten didn't want to do his homework. And so she said, well, let's go out and shoot baskets. And as on their way to shoot baskets, she looked at his sight words, which are very typical of kindergarten, first grade. You have words that you need to know. And she asked me if he knew how to play pig, which is, you shoot baskets and you have to do the same thing that the other person did if they make it until you spell the letter. Except she included some of his sight words, and they played grass and they played ball and they played kite and all that. And then she said, okay, it's time to do your homework. And he goes, oh, and she goes, well, we'll come back out and play some more, but let's go. Well, they went and got his sight words, and he goes, well, these are easy. Yeah, because she had just exposed them to him in a fashion of what he wanted to do. And the father of the young man looked at my daughter and said, oh my gosh, I can't get him to do homework. And he just did that in 10 minutes, and he thought he was smart, and he now thinks he's good and he can read. And she goes, yeah, that's what I am. I'm a teacher. Now her design degree is she is a music teacher. She is a vocal music teacher and is hired to teach vocal music grades 5 through 12. But she took the skills she had, met the 5-year-old, the kindergartner where they were, and made them enjoy learning. Wow. Isn't that what this is all about? Now, where I took these articles, and what I'm saying is my daughter's not special. There are millions of teachers that do that on a daily level in the classroom. and who would love to be able to do it more if they were freed up from all the standardized testing. But what I see here is this is an inroad to year-round schooling, which we've all talked about. There have been study after study done that students lose learning in June, July, and August. And we know for a fact if we change the agrarian school calendar, we would get better results. And that's what I see here with this summer school. Everybody's going to say, oh my gosh, look at this. The kids' scores went up and they're doing so much better. Duh. We've known that for 40, 50 years, that if we got off the agrarian calendar of school, which was started back in the 1700s and went to year-round schooling, we would get a better result because we would not have to spend the first 3 months of school reteaching all the things that the students lost over the summer when they never entered a classroom. So I'm hoping, and you say, oh, but why would I be a teacher? Because people only want to be teachers because they get the summers off. Year-round schooling can be done. Take your money to increase, okay? You don't have to increase it that much, but pay me my daily rate of pay, and instead of 185 days a year, pay me my daily rate of pay for 200 days. And what you do is you go to school for 9 weeks, take 3 weeks off. Go to school for 9 weeks, take 3 weeks off. Go to school for 9 weeks, take 3 weeks off. I think when you're getting close to that, that's 36 weeks and 12 is 48. You're pretty close to an entire year there. And you keep the students, they're not going to lose in 3 weeks what they're doing. Okay. And you're only marginally increasing the work of a teacher, but you pay them their daily rate of pay for those extra days that you're going to require them to work. Hence, their pay goes up because they're working more days. Why is that bad? It's like I always told people, my daily rate of pay is great if I was working 50 weeks out of the year and had 2 weeks of vacation. You couldn't afford me. So I understand when you say, well, I'm only working X, but I'm also working a lot more hours than 7:30 to 3, which we won't even get there. But if you want to pay me my daily rate of pay, I was one of those teachers that said, I'll teach year round. You want to hire me for a 200 or 210 day school year, which is year round schooling, and pay me my daily rate of pay? I'll take it.
So the outcomes will improve. And that means that we'll have a better society, economy, et cetera, and actually spend, relatively speaking, less on education because the cost to get students to a particular point is lower. And we could make more value out of a high school degree instead of saying that the only solution is for everybody to go to college.
We'll get them further.
Right.
Your 12, 13 years of school will actually get you about 15 years of education because you're not retraining kids with information or skills that they lost over the summer. So you can pick up and continue on. So you will be able to take them further, more in depth, and do more things.
So everybody's on this, whole, we need free college thing. But it sounds like what you're telling me, Lance, is that if we just increased and went to year-round schooling, which really doesn't add that much to the overall number of days that you're actually in school, it just breaks it up differently for the most part, that we'd add in the neighborhood of 3 years of school, almost like giving people free college, because we could teach them more while they're in high school and maybe make room for some of those things that you and I have talked about, classes on things like basic life skills, how to do taxes, that kind of stuff, because there would be time for those things instead of there's no time for that stuff.
You do your 10% pay raise. You increase the school year by 10%. So like 180, you go to almost 200 days of school. There you go. 5 days a week. That's 40 weeks, 3 weeks in between each thing. Now you're at 52 weeks. You're at your year. So you go up the 10% that you said. That's your pay raise. But then you also do it by increasing the amount of time in school, and everybody would be happier because as a teacher, you wouldn't say, oh, I got to reteach this stuff that they learned last year to get them to do. You could take them to new things and to new heights and better. And yet you're not spending any more money than you would if you give your 10% pay raise. And as the saying goes, you get more out of your money, right? You get more return.
Here's what the article from the Wall Street Journal says. Drawing on billions of dollars in federal aid, districts are expanding programs lengthening half days to full days, working in partnership with community organizations, and adding activities like sports, field trips, and debate classes. Quote, rather than computers, students will experience more hands-on exploratory learning in a program that feels like summer camp rather than summer school, said Tracy Pierce, the district's chief of marketing and public relations. Quote, this will include experiences such as outings to our rich park system, outdoor habitats, and local cultural centers, end quote. And here's the kicker. Researchers at the RAND Corporation have studied how summer school students fare academically and have found the most successful summer school programs were voluntary, lasted the full day, and spanned at least 5 weeks for 5 days a week. They included at least 3 hours of language arts or math classes and offered enrichment activities. They had no more than 15 students in a class and were tuition free.
See, we have the evidence. We just don't do it. I don't understand. Okay. This is the frustration of being an educator for almost 40 years. I know my intro says over 30 years, but I'm almost at 40 years. We know what works and we don't do it. That doesn't make any sense to me. And these numbers haven't changed. These are the same things I did my master's work over 30 years ago. Okay. And when I did it, they were saying the same thing back in the 40s and 50s. This hasn't changed. We know what works with young people. We know what to do, yet nobody wants change. We won't do it. And it's like, okay, I don't understand, the definition of insanity, right? Is doing the same thing over and over and expecting difference. We know what works and we won't do it. We won't make the changes. It's so simple. So simple. And it's not just ranting and raving here, folks, but like Justin said, it improves our society. We get a more educated workforce. We get a more educated populace, which means we'll be able to have even more things for us to live by in an easier life if we just implement some of these basic changes that every educational study by every corporation shows works.
We have all this information and we talk about things like free college. The average tuition, right, at college versus the cost, because we all get on look how much we're spending every year on our public school students. Well, that's way less than the national average for college tuition with room and board, and so if we were adding the equivalent of 3 years education without actually taking any more of their lives, we are now not only preparing them for the workforce better, but we're preparing them sooner, and we're making it more feasible for people to exit high school at 18 years old and go right into the workforce, which makes our workforce better, right? Because we know we're facing labor shortages across the board. So if we had more time in public education, I think that, I'm sure there's people out there that can do this math for us, the cost relative to, even if we don't do free college, but just the percentage of people we're sending to college and the student debt crisis and all this, how much of that would be fixed if we just made a high school degree more valuable, and relatively speaking, at a lower cost than if we just try to push everybody to college. Aside from we re-add value to a college degree, right? Because we've talked a lot about on this show that we are diminishing the value of a college degree by saying that that's what everybody needs to do. And yet the cost, right? The cost of the degree goes up and the value of it is going down. And that's
when we've talked about the number of students who have to take remedial classes in college because they don't have the skill set, right? Which is then increases the amount of their debt. This takes care of that. There wouldn't be any need for that.
It addresses a lot of things.
It sure does, and it's a simple solution, right?
Right.
And we're all about solutions in this show. This is a simple solution, folks, and it's not new. It's not magical. It's something that has been talked about for decades.
Folks are concerned about the national debt, Lance, right? And you say, well, we're going to do this and increase the debt. But what if we raised wages, right? Like we've been talking about forever, because then people would pay more, right? In taxes. And, well, then maybe we could afford to do this, right? And it'd give people more money in their pocket to go spend in the economy, more sales tax. Well, I don't know. Just just throwing something out there for folks to chew on here while we transition. But we're looking at coming up here how new test scores are showing that students, some good news, are rebounding after pandemic-related learning losses. It's not all it seems to be on the surface, though, so we've got more to talk about. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Willer.
Test scores show that math progress since the fall, but students of color fell further behind. So, math is getting better, students of color are struggling, and why might that all be? Well, as we talked about some, right, throughout the pandemic, one of the challenges with remote learning is an assumption that everybody's got access to the tools for remote learning. Which we know in rural areas and poverty-stricken areas, right, which often can be found in the inner cities and the poorer neighborhoods statistically, right, are more likely to include people of color. That means that those individuals who are already, right, they already are disadvantaged in regular school setting, we're now making it even harder for them. And that's where we've talked about the importance of things like expanding access to broadband, not only because it's important for the economy, right, for people in the workforce in rural communities, but also for these remote learners, as it inevitably becomes a bigger part of everything we're doing. On average, Lance, students are performing below pre-pandemic expectations, but the learning gaps that existed for many at the start of the 2020-2021 school year are shrinking, particularly in math, according to a report from Renaissance Learning. Students across 2nd through 8th grades are now closer to reaching expectations in math than they were in the fall. It will now take 2nd and 3rd graders about 2 to 3 weeks to catch up in math. Last fall, though, scores projected it would take them 4 to 7 weeks to catch up, per the reports. The new reports wasn't entirely encouraging, though. Middle schoolers have experienced more challenges in reading. Renaissance projects it will now take 7th and 8th graders 8 to 11 weeks to catch up to where they are expected to perform at this time of year, a wider gap than in the fall when they were only slightly behind meeting expectations. What sounds like if we move to that whole year-round schooling thing, we'd have less issues with these gaps just generally, right?
Yes. And it also shows, though, kudos to teachers, that as more and more students have gone back to face-to-face learning, in-school learning, we have seen an increase in the amount of learning that takes place. And that's due to the hard work of the teachers. I'm sorry. It is. Because you cannot, as you said, I have participated in a virtual academy this year. It is very hard to get your students to interact with you. That, depending on your district and what the rules are, they can just go off and do their own thing. Okay. Well, that then eliminates that student interaction, and they can decide what parts of their lessons they are going to do. And I will tell you that working with middle schoolers, they did not do the math, the reading, and the writing. Those are hard. Those are hard for middle schoolers. It is. And they chose, many of them, not to do that. So their skills fell behind, but once they go back to in-person schooling and they get that face-to-face learning environment, they will very much improve. Now, the students who met with us and who did attend I won't say required because they weren't required, but who did seek our help as at-home teachers, progressed very similarly to those that were in school. Again, face-to-face doesn't mean it has to be in a brick and mortar building. It can happen online. To your point of when we talked about before the show, online learning takes many different appearances. And those students who met with my wife and I, who were running the virtual academy for our local school district, did very, very well and scored very well on their state tests. Though and some of those who didn't did very well as well, because they had people at home who were helping them and reinforcing the ideas, and you have to do things. But we had many who struggled because they needed that face-to-face time. And not being in school, they had the option of whether or not to turn on their computer. And to your point, there were also computer issues. There were people who had issues who couldn't connect on a consistent basis, and that put them behind. But again, it makes sense, right? I mean, you put kids in front of teachers in some form or fashion, and they're going to learn faster than you thought they would. Wow. Really? Don't underestimate the power of young people, and don't underestimate the power of teachers. They can get the job done if you just give them the tools to do it. And to your point in the first segment, give them the opportunity to do it. Don't put them in a box and say it has to be done this way. Let the person in the room who has those students on a daily basis and knows them better than anybody else determine what the best form of education is for those kids to achieve the skills that you want those children to have. I'm done. Drop the mic. No, it's basic, right? Basic, simple.
It's. I feel like it's what we've been talking about for a long time, which is this whole idea.
But why? But we have to keep talking about it because
people aren't doing it.
People aren't doing it. That's the bottom line. The
ones that do are actually seeing the results that we're talking about,
exactly.
Right? Because that's what these articles are pointing out today, is this whole idea of, it's just crazy, right? That when we talk about online learning, it's just online learning. It's all the same. Well, no, it's so vastly different. The access to it is so vastly different. And that's the same thing is true of regular brick and mortar school, in-person learning, right? The experience in one district from the next, this idea that it's the same thing because we've done, standardized testing and all this. Some of that's becoming true and some of that's bad, that it's all the same. It's not necessarily a good thing to, it's all the same. And if you look at some of the districts, right, that have the highest performing values, some of the best performing students, and the ones that are going on and having the most success in life, they're the ones that are investing in those enrichment type of activities, right? The field trips, the off-site learning, the non-traditional learning, right? They're doing that thing that we talked about. They're treating the teachers like professionals and saying, here's your goals. You figure out how to meet them. We'll do what we can to help you get there, right?
And they're treating the student as an entire individual, not just a machine that you're dropping information in.
Right.
They need exercise. They need music class. They need PE. They need art class. They need those things to stimulate the brain so that they can learn math, English, and social studies and science.
Yeah. They have to be open and interested in learning.
The whole person.
Yeah. It's that whole, how hard is it to go up to somebody and start a conversation by telling them, you're wrong and you need to do these 3 things to change it. Versus
increase math class, but take away recess.
Right.
I mean, we have districts that are doing that, and we know with elementary kids, and the studies
it makes it worse,
show
not better,
that their scores drop because they need to go out and do physical. Think of your own day, right? How many times if you have a good boss, they say, get up and walk around, do stretches at your desk, move your body because it generates more thinking capability in your mind. So you become a better worker when you take 5 or 10 minutes and do things throughout the day to move your body. It works even better with young people. Give them time to run around, to experiment, to draw, to sing, and then all the synapses. And I can give you all the scientific reasons, but it makes them better students. It makes them learn better. It makes them want to learn.
Everything starts to come together when you think about education as not just, we're going to sit at this desk and I'm going to tell you about this, lesson, and then you're going to do this thing on this piece of paper that shows me it, right? Because there's a lot of ways to teach. That might be one of them. And for some, they need that, right? But at the same time, for a lot of them, there's other ways that are more effective or equally effective that also happen to be fun, which, as we know, with adults, right? If an activity is enjoyable, you're more likely to retain information from the activity than if you are upset or not wanting to do it.
But think of something as simple as when you were in junior high and high school and you had to change classes.
Mm-hmm.
That hustle and bustle and exercise and jostling and talking to your friends. You came in alive and alert. And by the time you left the classroom, you were ready to be jostled and talk and walk and go up and down steps. And so there's your there's your 3 or 4 minutes of exercise between each class that regenerates your desire for learning. Because what do most teachers have to do when you come into the classroom from changing classes?
Settle
You
down.
got to settle everybody down, but your brains are firing and you're really working hard and you accomplish a whole lot in the first half of the class. And as the class wears on, you start to lose your effectiveness to learn. And then it's time to jump up and go again. And it all starts over again. See, that's the simple, I mean, we're not even talking, but PE class and recess does even more. But there's just that basic movement. You know, how many times did I, in my classroom where kids came in and the students came in and they were just lethargic. I said, okay, everybody up.
Yep.
And just make big circles, you know, walk around the room for a few
Move,
minutes.
do something.
Yeah. And so they sat back down and they're like, I said, okay, now we're ready for the lesson. And bam, 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 bam. They just started firing answers.
The other thing too about giving teachers more latitude, because you and I have talked about this notion, right, that all teachers are good teachers. No, of course not. If you give them more latitude, it's also easier to identify the ones that shouldn't be there, right? Because like we talked about earlier, it's putting the responsibility on them instead of saying, here's the methodology and you just do what this says, right? Because then you can have not so great teachers that are just kind of, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. And you know, you can't get mad at me because I did what you said, right?
I did steps 1, 2, and 3, didn't work, but that's what you said to do.
Right, that's what you said to do. So it's not my fault.
Right.
You know, I did. And see, I think that's an important thing too, because not only can we pay teachers more, but we will also have a better crop of teachers by giving them more responsibility because we can get rid of ones that shouldn't be teachers at all. All of that is likely to improve all of this. But that's why we're having this conversation, because so often we try to make it, you know, we try to do the silo thing and look at everything separately. And hopefully you can see all of this stuff, you know, it's related. And thankfully there are solutions available that address multiple components of the challenges we're facing, not only in education, but in society. And that's what our mission here is at True Chat, right, Lance, is to foster a comprehensive learning environment, basically.
Well, and that's the exciting thing about this topic is we name some problems, but there are solutions and they're easy fixes compared to a lot of things that we talk about. But on this show, you know, our mission at this company and on this show is to educate people. There's that word, right? Educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And we think we've done that. If you agree or don't agree with us, let us know, podcast@thestateofus.org, and give us your thoughts on this topic, but also share it with your friends and your family. And when they ask you, so where are you hearing this cool stuff? Where are you having your mind blown and made to think about outside the box a little bit? Tell them it's on The State of Us. And where can I find that show? Well, we're on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere podcasts are found.
Tune in to The State of Us Tuesdays and Thursdays by 4 a.m. Eastern Time for the podcast. And we can be heard on select talk radio markets around the country as a syndicated radio program. For The State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.